I love it when on this channel I occasionally get recommendations from those of you guys who are huge fans of the same kind of movies that I love, who suggest movies that I should check out if I haven't already, or that I should review if I haven't already. And this is one of those occasions. Some of the coolest movies which we've reviewed on this channel have been recommendations, such as Virus and Screamers. I really appreciate those recommendations, and in the case of Screamers, I'd never even heard of that movie, so I was so glad to finally get around to seeing that one. This is a movie which I have seen before. However, I remembered much more about the first half of this movie, which is incidentally a TV miniseries, much more vividly than I remembered the second part. I think I've seen the whole thing before, but I wasn't certain. The first half is definitely memorable for some specific reasons, which I can't really get into because of spoilers, but basically Peter Benchley's Creature is, as I said, a made-for-TV miniseries, a two-parter, and it has a really long runtime, just like Stephen King's It, the original, if you will. Now, the movie isn't ridiculously long, so if you do want to rewatch it, it's not undoable. And the fact that it is naturally in two parts means that you could watch it over the course of 2 nights if you wanted to. So for those who haven't seen this movie, because we don't review TV miniseries or TV movies that often, what can you expect if you haven't seen it? What's the essential idea? Well, the idea of this movie, Creature, is based around bioengineered creatures, specifically dolphins, and even more specifically, a certain shark. These dolphins in particular are designed to be militarized so that they're smarter but also have the savagery of a shark for use in military purposes. That same kind of technology is applied, if I remember correctly, prior to the dolphins but unsuccessfully to a shark. And you learn all of this very early on in the film, but that certain shark is a little bit too clever for its own good. And there's more to this shark than meets the proverbial eye. So, as you'd assume, things don't exactly go well for the military, and the shark escapes, of course. And the first half of this mini-series reminds me quite a lot of Jaws, in all of the best ways. Now, of course, it's not as good as Jaws. I wouldn't even claim that. I don't think anyone in their right mind would. But there's a lot of things which are very reminiscent of it. A lot of the deaths, a lot of the scenarios, and the way the characters interact are very reminiscent of Jaws. It's set, though, in the islands, which is a nice location. You get some varied backgrounds of people in the film, which is cool, certainly something which Jaws doesn't have, with pale white people all over the place. And in the movie you get a combination of quality which is easily as good as many movies of the time, because if you think about it, some of the films from this era don't exactly look that fantastic for production value, so it can easily rival many of them, definitely in the horror genre in particular. But it combines that with a creature which was made by Stan Winston, so it looks fantastic, but also it's a cool idea for a creature, because it goes beyond just being a regular old shark, because you can make a great shark movie. Of course, Jaws is fantastic, one of the highest rated movies I've ever reviewed. I also happen to love Deep Blue Sea. I know a lot of people don't like that film. I love Deep Blue Sea. I think it's a great undervalued, in effect, modern B-movie, which has some interesting characters, certainly some unexpected moments, one of which is one of the most iconic unexpected moments, and some passable CGI based around some really cool, smart sharks. So a lot of similarities again. But with this movie, it's a little bit older. The effects are much more practical based than they are CGI, and as far as I'm concerned, it's all the better for it. And the creature is always going to be one of the most important things about a movie like this, of course, just like it would be with The Thing or The Blob or a variety of other movies which we've reviewed and will continue to review. And thankfully, the creature really holds up. It's a great concept, a great design, a formidable opponent in more ways than one, and it's carried out very well, for the most part. I'm not saying it's perfect, of course not, especially for a TV movie, but for a TV movie, it's really good. In fact, it's one of my favourite TV movies. Now, as far as stuff which I did and didn't like, the first thing that I noted was that when you go into the movie, you have TV movie expectations. And TV movie expectations are altogether different to traditional movie expectations, and that is you will often have a much lower standard of quality which you're expecting from the movie, and that does in part lead to, I would say, being more impressed by this miniseries than you would if it were a traditional feature film. If this were a feature film, it wouldn't be bad. If it was exactly the same, but it was just one long movie, then I think people would be a little bit less fond of it. Not the super fans, but I mean people in general, because when it's a movie, people just think, oh, it should be better, because it's a movie, whereas with a TV movie, they'll give it a pass. But the fact with this movie is, it's really well done. The visuals, the score, which is great, the effects, which are fantastic, even the characters, which can sometimes be over the top, deliberately, and sometimes perhaps be annoying. There's a younger character in it in particular, the son of the main character, who is, I don't know what he thinks he's acting in, but it isn't this movie. He spends most of the movie looking extremely terrified at everything, and he was kind of hilarious, but even then, he didn't ruin the film by any means. If anything, he added some levity to it. So, as far as expectations go, I think the movie benefits from being a TV movie, very much so. And as far as TV movies go, as I mentioned, I would say it's one of the best, actually, especially for its time. As far as the characters and the casting, well, there are plenty of recognisable faces. There are a lot of people who you will recognise in this movie, both from the big and the small screen, and that was great to see. It's always cool when you can get a bunch of people who you wouldn't necessarily expect to show up for something like this to be in it. And maybe they were just there for the paycheck, but even if that is the case, it's still cool that they are there. It gives the movie, again, that jump up, that little bump in terms of quality, to immediately set you a little bit at ease that, oh, this probably isn't going to be horrendous. And thankfully it isn't, because the casting's good, the characters are good, and they play their roles convincingly. They don't really overdo it either, for the most part, which is cool. They could very easily overdo it, because at the end of the day, these guys had to know that this isn't going to be seen by millions of people. It's going to be seen by thousands, and of those thousands, only a few hundred will genuinely hang on to this film and keep it with them as one of their favourites. And they had to know that when they were making this movie. So the fact that they did give it as much effort as they did, I think is cool. Paycheck or not, that's good. It's commendable. Now, I mentioned, of course, that the first half in particular reminded me very much so of Jaws, and I would say that the whole first half of this mini-series is by far the closest to Jaws than it is anything else. I would say secondary to Jaws, there's some definite Deep Blue Sea in there, but of course Deep Blue Sea came out later. In the second half, on the other hand, which I don't like quite as much, but there's definitely plenty in there too, like, some elements of it, especially early on in the second half, actually reminded me quite a bit of Aliens, with the whole colonial marines going in and all that kind of thing, and having a team that's run by a guy that doesn't really know what he's doing, and having people who are already familiar with the creature telling them, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to deal with this, but not being listened to, just like with Aliens and Ripley. That was cool. It's certainly a movie which takes inspiration from iconic horror, such as Jaws and Aliens and a couple of others, but it doesn't ape them. That's the great thing. Creature is its own thing, and although it will remind you of a lot of other movies, both TV and feature, it doesn't copy them. And that's very cool, to have a movie which is genuinely this unique to its own concept. That's cool. You can really value that if you choose to, and I do choose to. I value that a lot. But of course, at some point we have to get to our scoring system. So first up, as always, we get the story and the plot. And for the story and plot of Creature, I'm actually going to rate it above par with a 6, because the main thing that holds it back from being even higher is twofold. One, the story is well executed, but not amazing. So, as I've said before, it wouldn't be fair, quite simply, to rate it even higher in comparison to movies which are very complex and very clever, such as stuff like The Matrix, which for its time was very clever, or Inception, or Oldboy, those movies which are truly brilliant in terms of storytelling. So it just wouldn't be fair to those films to rate this one way, way up there just because it was executed well. However, the fact that it was executed as well as it was, especially for a TV movie, is easily enough to earn it a 6, and I feel that superfans of this film will definitely rate it higher than that, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. If it was my personal opinion, rather than, if it was subjective rather than objective, I might give it a 7, maybe even an 8, but more likely a 7. As far as the characters go, the casting, the choices that they make, that kind of stuff, well, although I was singing its praises earlier on, I am still going to give it a 6, because some of the line delivery, some of the casting, the sun, which I mentioned earlier, they do kind of take you out of the moment. And to be fair, it's not as much that they take you out of the moment, it's more so that you will occasionally get the gentle reminder, and sometimes the not so gentle reminder, that you are indeed watching a TV movie. And those moments, such as in Stephen King's It, do happen. And again, it just wouldn't be fair to rate it higher because of that. It wasn't a failure, not even close, but it's just a simple fact. They're not amazing, but they are good. Better than what they easily could have been, which is why, again, I am rating it above par with a 6. As far as the visuals go, the special effects, the overall look of the film, the camera work, the quality, I'm going to give it an 8, which is a really good score for a TV movie, and the reason why is, well, actually it's a multifaceted reason why, in effect. Stan Winston's creature, fantastic. As I said earlier, it's a good concept, it's well carried out, it's convincing, it's cool, it's creepy, but also just the visuals in general. The choice of location is great, it's very interesting, very visually rich. The combination of land and sea is cool, because, stuff like Jaws is... a lot of the best stuff takes place on the boat, whereas in this movie you've got a nice mix of both, and the visual style overall is, again, easily as good as a lot of feature films, especially stuff like action films from that same kind of time period. So overall I feel very comfortable with giving this one an 8. It's a good looking film. As far as the audio, the soundtrack, the music, all that kind of good stuff, I'm going to again return to the world of 6s with another one, because once again, it's not mind-blowing. I did like the score. I didn't adore it or love it or think, I need to download this immediately or listen to it, but it was good. Definitely above par, no question there. I feel like I might be able to talk myself into giving it a 7 in that regard, but I'm giving it a 6 because I think that's the more objective answer. And as far as finally the rewatchability and entertainment factor, well, for that one I am going to disappoint some people, especially fans of the movie, by giving it a 5. And the reason why I'm giving it a 5 isn't because it was bad, because as I've said before in my videos, a 5 is not a bad score. That's what it should be in any particular way, and if it's lower than 5, it's underperforming, and if it's higher, it's doing well. So me giving it a 5 isn't bad, I'm just saying it's what it should be. Now at the same time, the reason why I'm giving it a 5, even though everything else was higher, is primarily for the same reason that I would give something like Stephen King's It, or some other TV movies like that, or just movies which are extremely long, say 3 hours plus, a word of caution to the viewer, because the simple fact is, it's such a long story and such a long movie-going or TV movie-going experience that even though you won't necessarily get bored, it simply takes a huge amount of time to sit down and watch the whole thing. And although if you've got the time, that's not a problem, if you've got a 2-hour movie or a 90-minute movie, which a lot of horror movies are compared to this 3+ hour extravaganza, then of course you're going to find more trouble to have that kind of time. You need to set aside the time for a movie like this to watch the whole thing, unless you're going to fast forward it, which what's the point in that? So that is simply going to hurt the rewatchability, not from a quality basis, but just from a factual basis. It's a really long movie. That's the simple fact of it. So overall, I enjoy it as far as rewatchability. I believe I've watched the whole thing twice, once years ago and once again recently to make notes and refresh my memory on it. I would watch it again, but it would be more so the kind of movie which I would watch with someone for them to experience it rather than just on my own. And I must admit, the main reason why that is the case is because of that length. For that kind of time, I would rather watch a couple of new movies which I haven't seen rather than this really long one. It's not bad, not at all, but that's the simple case for me, and I believe that will be the case for some other people also. But overall, that means that I'm giving Peter Benchley's Creature a very healthy score of 3.1 out of 5, which might sound low, but that's not. 2.5 is the baseline, so that's well above that, and that's a similar kind of level to a lot of actual full feature-length horror films, so I think that's a very respectable score indeed. So overall, if you haven't seen Creature and you get the chance to pick it up, you can pick it up pretty cheap, usually, say on Amazon or eBay, so I would recommend it. If you're a creature feature fan, well, the name of the movie kind of explains that it's going to be good for you. If you're a monster fan, if you're a fan of good creature designs and special effects and pretty cool storytelling, then check it out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. But overall, that's it for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.